everybody. I am so thankful that you are here. I see a lot of new people. I see people coming back from a summer away. So I am thankful that you'll be with us in worship today. Once again, my name is Pastor Nathan. You can call me Pastor. You can call me Nathan. Call me whatever is meaningful to you. Titles aren't about me. They're really just so you know we have a pastor and then even a church that really cares for you deeply. So I'm thankful you would be here. We are working through a couple weeks where we are trying to help one another communicate the story of God, but not just the story of God. We're communicating how the story of God interacts with our story. What has God done in your life? What is God doing now? Someone asks you, what do you actually believe about this Jesus guy? And they don't always ask it so clearly. Do you kind of just put it off, or do you have something to say? My dream for all of you is that you can actually share something that you believe God is doing in your life without having like 2 beers in your system. Like that's the real hope, right? That you actually care enough about this stuff, you're like, I think I have a way to share it that I can even show my face the next day after talking with them, right? That's my hope. So today, here's what I want for you. I want you to have a confidence. I want you to have a trust. I want you to have faith that God is doing something in your life. Because you can actually know who God is. You can know who God is. Somehow there might be this idea that God is this like old grandfather looking figure with like a long beard sitting up in the sky, and he's this far off being that isn't really knowable. Others might think of God as a metaphor, maybe just a bunch of stories collected by an ancient civilization. God is not dogma, he is not doctrine, he is not even a book. God is a person who is knowable, and that matters because in the person of Jesus Christ, he shows himself as a son that you can relate to. He shows himself as a son that's actually after you, chasing you down, finding you, trying to let you know of the deep love of your heavenly Father that you have right now, have no need to earn or prove, but that in Jesus Christ you have the Father's love. So we can know who God is, but you might want to know what God actually does. What does God do? And this actually answers to, when we talk about what does God do, what you want to do is look at the person of Jesus. Because Jesus actually speaks for God the Father. If you want to know what God looks like, Jesus, you look at Jesus. Jesus was like a 33-year-old Middle Eastern man when he died, and that is the best picture we have of God. That's actually what God looks like even now. We believe Jesus actually still has a body, and that is what God looks like. But what does God do? In Jesus Christ, we, in this community, communicate the story of Jesus Christ in 3 images. And so if you're new, you're going to be like, okay, that's a little bit of a weird thing you guys do. If you've been around, you know what's going on. But I'm looking for some of the kids around. We're looking at the kids. And we have 3 little pictures that tell the story of Jesus. So help me out, kids, if you're around. We have that Jesus was born in a manger. Kids, can you help me out with your arms? Jesus was born in a manger. Jesus died on a cross, right? And then Jesus is king over all things with a crown, right? So here we go again. Jesus was born in a manger. He died on a cross. He's a resurrected king with a crown, and we do it faster. Manger, cross, crown, manger, cross, crown, manger, and it gets faster and faster. That is the story of Jesus. And Jesus is doing something in your life. And the manger, cross, and crown give us a way to latch on to and understand what God might be doing. So the first, the manger. This might be a kind of wild idea we take for granted, but God was born as a human being. God has, like, in Jesus Christ, a day of birth, a birthday. It probably wasn't December 25th. We don't know the exact date. But isn't that kind of wild? The idea of God actually wants to be known, so he He tells you he has a birthday. He was born in an actual city that you can even still now go find on a map. Jesus is real and shows us that God is knowable. The manger tells us that God is actually present with us, that actually God came to be with us so we would not be without him. In a manger, we learn that God's actually not some far-off grandfather, bearded being in the sky, but he's actually with us. And in a manger, we learn that God is not far from us, but actually willing to step into the dramatic, messy story that is humanity. And so I want to be a little bit generous about the story we tell about humanity, and so I'll put it into two ways. In humanity, there were times when humans grew frustrated with God, and there were times where God's people cried out to him to save them. They grew frustrated with God because they said, why don't you become something like we really need you? We need you to rescue us, save us. Why aren't you doing the things that we want you to do? They grew frustrated with God. The best kind of picture is probably that they cried out to God. They said, no one can save us but you. We know you're the one who created us. Don't give up on us. We know that it's you who can save us. But all along, it was the story of a messy humanity who were less than faithful, but a God who was present with them, who refused to give up on them. And in a manger, you have a tangible moment where you can know that Jesus is present in your life. He is with you even now. But there is this part of the story where Jesus is born that I think is actually a kind of funny point that Scripture makes. It says this, it says, at the right time, Jesus was born. And that's kind of a funny thought, because if you think about the way Jesus was born, he was born to a woman who was unmarried. It was not the right time for Mary. She did not necessarily want to be pregnant, but she had this baby. They had to travel for a census, and so, at what point in, pregnancy do people have to stop traveling? When is that? Immediately, because it feels terrible? Is that what's going on? No, there's, a point, 7 months, something like that. Pregnant people don't travel, right? And yet, they had to kind of take Mary back to her hometown for a census. No, the fact is that there was not a right time for Jesus to be born. Jesus was born at a very inconvenient time. And I'm wondering, as you think about your story, and then think about God's story, I wonder if one of the tensions is that as we live life, we wonder if God just has really bad timing. Does God have bad timing? We wonder why he doesn't show up the way we need him to show up. Because the way you live your life is that you go about life and you have the breakup or the diagnosis, or life goes sideways, and life isn't going the way you wanted, and you ask God, would you intervene? Would you fix something? Would you do it? Are you even out there? Are you doing anything in my life? And what you need to know is that in the promise of the manger, you have a God who is present and with you right now in this life. This last week, I got to hang out with a good buddy, Trent. Trent, you're in the back. I know you're getting thrown under the bus for this one, but it's all good. Trent, in the last year of your life, things have gone way differently than you ever expected, and I've shared much the same of my life, right? Things have not gone as planned. The timing of life has not been ideal. The timing of things have been off. And Trent, you shared that at some point during the last year, you said you were trying to kind of read the tea leaves of God, trying to figure out what's going to happen next and what am I supposed to do. And you said kind of at some point I gave up trying to figure out what the tea leaves were telling me. I stopped trying to figure out what maybe God's plan was or try to tell the future or what I'm supposed to do. And maybe as I was thinking about this after our time together, where we land is trusting in a manger. Trusting that even when the timing is off and God seems distant, in a manger, God has promised to be with us and active in our lives just as they are, even if they aren't working out the way we ever expected. And maybe that's true for you too. I want you to have permission to believe that God's doing something in your life. I know that God is doing something in my life. I know that He is present. You can say it too. Your God has proven it to you. He is present in your life. It doesn't just stop at a manger. There's a cross. In a cross, there was a very dark day, both figurative and literal. It was a dark day because Jesus, the Son of God, God Himself, was abandoned by His friends. He was betrayed by those who said they would never betray Him, and He was abandoned by God Himself. He experienced the darkest day figuratively, but then on that day when He died, a literal darkness came over. Actually, in the middle of the day, it says everything grew dark and the earth trembled, and then there was this soldier who was actually responsible for killing Jesus, and he said, "This is not good news for me. This might be the actual Son of God." And what you see in a cross is that Jesus can actually show up in the darkest moments of your life. The moments where God feels most distant, the moments where it's all gone wrong, we have no reason to believe that God does not show up in the darkest places of your life. One of the great joys of being a pastor is that I get to hang out with people that I otherwise probably wouldn't get to hang out with. Namely people who are in nursing homes or have decreased mobility. And to be honest, it's actually one of the greatest joys of the week, getting to hear people who are kind of living difficult lives share really about their faith with me. I visited one such woman named Linda, and she has experienced a lot of darkness in the last year of her life. Her husband died about a year ago. She wasn't able to return home because of some health complications. She's living in a place where she'd rather not be living. No, the last year for her has been a bit dark. And as I visited her this last week, she said, "Pastor, I have something I really want to show you," and I'm all up for show and tell. I kind of love it. And she pulls out of her pocket this knockoff Lego-looking figure, and she shows it to me, and she says, "Someone gave this to me last week. It's a little Jesus." And it's like this very off-brand looking Lego little figurine that sort of looks like Jesus, and she made a point to say, well, at least Jesus isn't white, right? He's yellow, and I thought that was a pretty funny joke. And she's sharing this thing with me, and I'm not one for gimmicky Bible knick-knacky stuff, but when a woman who has experienced the real darkness of life shows you, and she says, I have this little Jesus that's been in my pocket since last week, and she kind of thinks about all the darkness she's experienced in the last year, and then she's willing to say something like, "I know Jesus has been there the whole time. I know Jesus has been there the whole time." She didn't mean the little Lego figurine. She meant Jesus. Because Jesus, who would die on a cross, actually shows you that even in the darkest moments of life, He's not distant. But actually, maybe it's Jesus who does His best work in the darkness. That even if you have darkness in your own life and you have a darkness that's done to you, maybe that's where the cross comes in and this forgiveness and reconciliation work of Jesus Christ takes place. No, I know Jesus has been working in the darkness. I want you to have confidence to know that God is doing something in your life. So the story of Jesus, you have a manger, you have a cross, and you have a crown. And maybe you're thinking about these three images, and to be honest, anyone can actually be born. All of us have been born. Anyone can actually die on a cross. I hope that doesn't happen to you. That's not my hope for your life. but anyone can die and everyone will die. But the story of Jesus continues in an improbable way that maybe you never expected. Actually, this Jesus who died and was put in a grave 3 days later came back to life and had this body, and he appeared to hundreds of people. And in a very real way, we know that this story is true because he appeared to hundreds, and then they told thousands. And now, because of that moment, that resurrection, you are here today. From hundreds to thousands to millions to billions, you believe in the resurrection of Jesus Christ even today. And there's this writing that Paul has when he writes to the church who's in a city called Corinth, and he's like, guys, if this Jesus didn't raise from the dead, we would do something else. Honestly, like without it, we would go do anything else because it wouldn't even matter. It would just be a philosophy. It would be a dogma, a doctrine, an idea, a philosophy. But no, you believe in a person who died and came back to life, and that means everything for you. So one of my friends has recently become he's asleep right now. He's a bartender. He won't hear this. He's become a master, some kind of like master of his Mason's Lodge. Does anyone know what a Mason's Lodge is? A Masonic Lodge? Okay. So he's like a master of this Mason's Lodge, and I kind of find it funny because Masonic groups, they believe everything and nothing at the same time. That's something to unpack. They believe everything and yet nothing. And he had this ceremony where he was inducted as the master of his lodge, and after the ceremony, which looked way weirder than even our liturgy and our worship, which I let him know, we were down in the basement of the lodge, and we're having some drinks and we're talking, and people find out I'm a pastor, and so they ask me and they say, well, isn't Jesus just like a Horus type? Isn't he just like another mythological type of figure or another god kind of thing? And there's no reason to become combative or defensive. I heard them out. I heard what they had to say. And it hit me that as much as I've at times tried to give up on this Jesus stuff, you don't give up on a man who died and came back to life. Nobody else does that. Only Jesus does. And as I communicated that, I told them, I've thought about trying to just give up on all of it, but I just can't because a man who died comes back to life, and I can't avoid that. They just said, all right, difference of opinion. But that doesn't stop you from having a confidence, knowing that you have a Jesus who died and came back to life, and it means everything for you. I want you to have permission to trust, to believe, to know, to communicate the story, to say the words, I know, and mean it. I'll end with this story it's a really beautiful story of an obstinate woman who she knew, and some people kind of questioned her story. I have a buddy who's a pastor out in the Bay Area, San Francisco area, and there was a woman who's advanced in years, and she became a widow. And that week after her husband died, she had a dream. And she said maybe it wasn't even a dream, and it happened at night, and she said, Jesus appeared to me. Right? And if you're too deep into our Lutheran sensibilities, you're already getting uncomfortable to think about someone saying, Jesus appeared to me. And so she goes to her pastor, who says, hey, pastor, Jesus appeared to me last night. He came to me. And the pastor, maybe because male pastors aren't too akin to listening to women, kind of said like, oh, that's nice. Maybe not, right? And she knew. She said, I know Jesus came to me. I know he appeared. And she went to another pastor, and that pastor gave much the same answer, kind of dismissed her outright if Jesus actually appeared to her or not. And then finally, she still had this story where she knew Jesus appeared to her. And so she goes to another person, an elder in the church that she trusted, and she said, Jesus appeared to me. And thank God for elders, people who have a heart, people who care about the congregation, the people of God. And he just says, well, what did Jesus say? And the woman says, Jesus came to me, he appeared and said, "Peace be with you." And the elder said, "Yeah, that was Jesus." Because what other reason would we have to think that Jesus wouldn't say such a thing, right? No, as I know that there are people in this room who have had deep, meaningful experiences encountering Jesus himself, and sometimes you're like, I'm not sure if that actually happened, but what we do is we say what happened, and then we line it up with the person of Jesus Christ as he's revealed himself. And if that's who has revealed himself to you, then we have no reason to doubt. You can say, I know that Jesus has done something in my life. We're going to share a video here in a moment. A good friend named Dan, he worships down at Christ Memorial. We're one church in two places. And he actually shares, sometimes with maybe some like insider baseball type of language, what he thinks God has done in his life. But I find it really beautiful. I preface that because he says at one point, he said, I had a dream and Jesus did something. The other part of his testimony that he shares, and I want you to know, is maybe as I've been talking about God doing something in your life, you don't have a tangible moment to point to. You don't have this kind of charismatic experience or something that excited your brain. Well, what Dan shares is actually, he says, well, when I was baptized, I know God did something in my life. And so if you in this room are thinking, I'm not experiencing God the way maybe Pastor Nathan's describing, know that if you've been baptized, you belong to Jesus. He's present in your life. And if you're not baptized, then I would love to have a conversation with you about that. But no, I want you to hear Dan's story so you might reflect and see how your story is wrapped up in God's story. And so we hear from Dan.
In November 1989, I took a new position, which I was excited would hopefully allow me to earn the identity I was hoping to create as a successful businessman. After a few weeks, I was diagnosed with cancer and needed surgery to remove the tumor. And Nancy and I were to be married in less than 4 months. I was devastated and angry at the same time. Obviously, this was not part of my plan or the identity I was trying so hard to create. After the surgery, it was confirmed that it was in fact cancer, but the doctors had yet to develop the next step. As I waited on their follow-up, I remember a very explicit dream. One night, I perceived Jesus calling me down his path for my life. The doctors determined that the cancer was caught early enough that at this time I needed no chemotherapy, radiation, or follow-up surgery. Christmas that year was especially meaningful as I reflected on all of the blessings in my life. Then, our full attention was turned to our wedding date in March. My focus was on the identity I wanted to be perceived through our wedding ceremony. I had not forgotten about the dream and began to feel the desire to be a member of the Lutheran Church where Nancy was already a member. I joined the new member class conducted by the senior pastor soon after Easter. During the class, he had asked if anyone would need to be baptized. I was the only one to raise my hand. In preparing for baptism, I tried to think about how it would feel during the sacrament and immediately following. Surrounded by my family, on July 8th, 1990, at the age of 26, I was baptized. It felt like a burden was lifted. As the year passed, I did not think much about my baptism until I reached the 1-year anniversary of my baptismal birthday. As I reflected on the year past, I came to the understanding that the Holy Spirit was doing his divine work, creating a new heart, a new mind, and giving me godly desires. It was then, as I looked back over that year, that I could see God's presence and power working in my life. Over the years since my baptism, he has created in me the desire to pray intentionally, to be in his word regularly, and to give sacrificially. And now I know that my identity is in Jesus Christ as a baptized child of God. There were many people who played a role in my baptismal decisions and my faith walk, but I would acknowledge that my wife, especially, Nancy, walked alongside me and showed me what a life full of faith looks like, and I will be forever grateful. 11 years later, I was diagnosed with a brain tumor. The anger was gone, and we prayed that God would use it to glorify himself and to bless all of the people that we meet.